You ever feel that way? Yeah. Yeah, I remember, it was very humbling. I've always been a bigger than average guy, and my dad, who's only 6 foot, I can say that. My dad, who's only 6 foot, he used to say, I used to love watching you wrestle. And he didn't say that in hopes that I would lose, but there was times in my wrestling career I had to wrestle up a weight class, which means that I was in there with guys who could turn me upside down and to do anything they wanted to with me. And he said it was good to see that because he can't do it anymore. Yeah. But that's the way it was. No. You ever been to a funeral in which you're talking with the family and someone says something along the lines of, I wish we were able to make peace before they died. William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet was written on that basis. The two families, Montague and Capulet, who had some sort of issue, was not resolved until Romeo and Juliet died. We're talking about forgiveness today, and the need to forgive, and the power of forgiveness, and the expectation of our being willing to forgive other people. This past Tuesday night at our VBS, we talked about the parable of the unmerciful servant, which is found in Matthew chapter 18, verse 23, if you'd like to flip there with me. Peter comes to Jesus and he says this. Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother when he sins against me? Up to 7 times. Sometimes we're tempted to give Peter a hard line and say, you're just going to forgive someone 7 times when someone does the same thing to you? Just 7? Goodness sakes, you're a follower of Jesus, and the best you can come up with is 7? Well, we got to remember something. The original teachings of the rabbis, was to say that a brother might be forgiven of a repeated sin 3 times. 3 times. On the 4th, there is no forgiveness. So if you were to look at a timeline of thought, ever since that tradition came along until Jesus started teaching, that was the thought, was 3 times. I can forgive my brother for... Now again, remember, this is for the same thing. Alright? It's the same wrong, the same sin is done against me. I am required by Jewish tradition to forgive them 3 times. And then the 4th time, forget it. They're on their own. I don't have to do a thing. And so you look at what Peter's doing. Peter comes up to Jesus and says, how many times should I forgive my brother when he sins against me? Up to 7 times. That's more than double the regular Jewish teaching. And also that's that very important number 7 that we have in the Jewish religion. That doesn't sound bad. And again, remember, we're talking about the same thing over and over again. The same sin, the same wrong. Not 7 different things, but the 7 of the same instances. They lied to me 7 times. Really? We keep falling for it. Do we have to forgive? Jesus answered. Now again, based on your footnotes and based on what version you have, it says 1 or 2 things. We're going to talk about it. It says, Jesus answered. This is what I got. I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. Some of your versions probably says, I tell you, not 7 times, but 7 times 70 times. Now, Kyle, Rigo, Lupita, I'm doing math again this morning, so just be ready. All right. The question gets asked, is it 77 or is it 7 times 70? Which 7 times 70 is 23. No, 7 times 70 is 490. The answer is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter in the long run. Say, why? Okay, let's be honest. How many of us here this morning are going to keep our ledger And we're going to keep a record of every time someone does the same wrong thing to us. And we're going to count up to 77 times. I want to know, just so I know who I really don't need to wrong. All right? Okay, I don't see any hands. Okay, if we're not going to do it 77 times, what makes us think we're going to do it 490? Really? But that's the point. Jesus did that on purpose. There's nothing special about the number 77. There's nothing special about the number 490. The point is, don't count. Don't count. Stop counting. Stop counting the wrongs that are done against us by others. As the Disney song says, let it go. Let it go. But it's hard to let it go, isn't it? We want to hold on to it. I've been wrong. They owe me a debt. I have been wrong, and they need to make it right. And we can hold on to this anger, and we can hold on to this frustration, and this ill will, and this ill feeling. This happens in the church too. And it will affect how we live the rest of our lives. It will affect our relationships with others and with God. And we will be miserable people if we forget how big of a debt we have been forgiven. See, that's the thing about forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't about somebody deserving forgiveness, somebody meriting forgiveness. Oh, they finally apologized. I can now forgive them. No, it has nothing to do with that. Our ability to forgive really has nothing to do with other people's willingness to offer their apologies. And if that's what we're waiting for, we need to get over ourselves and move on. Because the teachings of God's Word tell us that our willingness to forgive comes from a simple fact that we realize how much we have been forgiven by God. And in order to illustrate this point, Jesus decided to tell a parable. He said in verse 23, "Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him." Okay, let's stop right there. The entire point of this parable, so we're going to spend a little bit of time on this. The point of the parable is to understand these amounts. We're going to talk about 10,000 talents. We're also going to talk about 100 denarius. Do we know what these are? Because these days, you owe me 10,000 talents. Okay. It's kind of like watching Back to the Future. You might remember the first Back to the Future movie, and Marty goes back in time and he's talking to the Doc of 1955, and he finds out that he has to have 1.51 gigawatts in order for the time machine to work, and he just starts freaking out. 1.51 gigawatts, and he runs out of the room. Marty's going after him saying, "What's a gigawatt?" That's how it is with the talents. He owes him 10,000 talents. Oh my goodness. What is that? Now, if you have a footnote, it might say millions upon millions of dollars. But I don't know about your Bible. My Bible is, I preach out the NIV, what was written back in 1984. That's over 30 years ago. Yeah, over 30 years ago now. And inflation has reared its ugly head. And so, we've kind of lost the value. And in order to get the point, we have to understand somewhat, at least kind of in a ballpark, of what we're talking about in order to get the punch of what Jesus is trying to give us. So let's first talk about the tale of the talent. A talent, or when it was originally conceived, a talent was not a monetary value, it was a weight. 1 talent equals 75 pounds. Now, there are those who believe that a talent can weigh up to 110 pounds. In essence, they're trying to make the talent be, the weight of a person. I don't know about you, but I haven't seen 110 pounds in a long time. But, on the lower scale, in order to give this guy a little bit of a break, we'll go with the 75-pound talent. Now, again, a talent of what? That's the question. I could have a talent, I can have 75 pounds of styrofoam, but that don't mean you care. So what are we going to talk about? Let's use gold. Let's use something with some value to it. We'll talk about a talent of gold. Now, gold, as you know, amount is based on how much gold you have, based on its weight. Well, let's put this back to today's times. I saw something that really helped me out was they did a table using the value of gold from February 2016. Now, I don't own gold, so, I just go with what the table gave me. But apparently in February 2016, gold was worth $38 a gram. Okay? Now, 1 talent equals 75 pounds. Gold equals $38 a gram. So a grand total for 1 talent of gold would be $1,250,000. Well, let me write a check right now. But before we get too excited, this is 1 talent. 1. Uno. The man owed 10,000. The servant owed 10,000 talents, which gave us the correct amount of his debt to the ruler, $12,500,000,000 in today's money. Alrighty, yeah. How many of us, I've been here, and I've made those stupid mistakes in my early 20s, and have been able to rack up credit card debt that we're still trying to work out and get over with, so that we can move on with our lives. Ever been in debt? Yeah, it happens. Debt is one of those things that happens. But have we ever been in $12,500,000,000 worth of debt? Whew. This is a whole new level. This is what was owed to the ruler. In verse 25 it says, "Since he was not able to pay, the master had ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt." Okay, now let's have the story of the debt. All right, the first thought was let's sell this family into slavery. Okay, yeah. The very most that you might get out of a slave, and this is one of those diamond in the rough type situations, you might get 1 talent, not of gold, but you might get a talent, maybe silver or a lesser metal, out of somebody selling themselves into slavery. The truth is, though, that your average person was sold into slavery for 1/10 of a talent, and again, not of gold, something of a lesser value. But let's, just for the sake of argument, he was able to sell himself for a talent of gold. He was just awesome. So you got a talent for him, you got a talent for his wife, and let's say he had a couple of kids. You get a talent for Junior, and you get a talent for a little girl. And then, for some reason, he had some, antique roadshow type furniture he was able to get another talent for. Well, congratulations. You just paid back 5 talents. You now owe 9,995 talents. Do we see where this is going? There was no way at all that this man was going to pay back this debt. It was not going to happen. No matter what he did, no matter what he had. Hey, let's have a little bit of fun. He was a servant. How long would it take him to pay it back? Well, let's say he was a servant that got minimum wage. All right? What if he worked it off? Okay, well, minimum wage in the state of Texas is $7.25 an hour. All right? So let's say he was able to work 8 hours a day for 365 days, never paid back anything. He would get $58 a day. Let's say he never took time off. He didn't have, in this fancy land, he didn't worry about paying taxes or anything like that. A yearly wage would be $21,170. So every year he was able to hack away at this $12,500,000,000 debt by increments of $21,170. How long would it take him? That would take him 590,458 years. Well, let's just get started. Now remember, the longest ages that we have in the Bible is 970. 969 years. That's less than 1,000. Again, do we realize? Do we see it? There was no paying off this debt to the ruler. None. Not even a possibility. The servant, in verse 26, the servant fell on his knees before him. "Be patient with me." "Be patient with me," he begged, "and I will pay back everything." "No, you won't." The servant's master, watch this, the servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. The $12,500,000,000 that was owed, gone. He didn't have to pay a penny. He didn't have to pay a down payment. Didn't have to pay a percentage. His wages did not have to be garnished. Nothing. The debt was simply gone because the ruler chose to have mercy. It's done. It's over. Maybe you've had the experience, or if you listen to the Dave Ramsey show, they do this thing with people who have paid off all their debt. They get to go on the air and just basically I'm debt free, and it's a big joyous thing, and the people are excited. If you've been able to get out from underneath the debt that you've owed, you know that feeling of just it's gone. Well, this guy's debt was gone, and he didn't have to do anything. It's gone because the king was merciful. And so if that much debt in our life has been erased, not because of anything we did except ask and beg, but the king said, okay, it's water under the bridge, no big deal. How would we react? Oh, goodness sakes, there would be dancing in the street. There would be great rejoicing. There would be happiness. There would be joy. There would be the overwhelming feeling of relief. Maybe you've been able to sleep that night better than you have slept for years because of that debt that was hanging over our heads. That is now gone. It's gone. But that is not what this guy does. It says in verse 28, "But when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. Okay, let's talk about the denarius. Okay, a denarius was a coin that was equal to a day's wage. All right, so if you went out and you worked a day, at the end of the day, if I was your paymaster, I will come out and give you a denarius. And so a denarius will equal 1 day's pay. 1 coin, 1 day work. All right. So 100 denarii equals basically 100 days' wages. Now, if you took the Jewish calendar and you took out all the Sabbaths, and then you took out all the holy days, and the festivals that you weren't allowed to work, you might work around 300 days a year. All right, so what we're looking at is also 100 days, about a third of the year worth of pay, worth of money. Now again, let's use our, to put that into a modern spin. Again, let's go back to our, minimum wage level service that we have going on here. You got $58 a day. Working an 8-hour day at $7.25, and then times 100, you get $5,800. Now again, depending on what financial level we're at, this could be a lot or this could be a little, but that's not the comparison we're supposed to be making. How much is this to our life? The comparison we're supposed to be making is how much is this compared to the $12,500,000,000 debt? That's the question. And so let's ask, if you had your choice between paying $12,500,000,000 or $5,800, which would you rather pay? Who's going for option A? All right, I'm giving you a little bit of time just to make sure you're sure. All right, option B. Okay, now I'm really worried. All right. No, B, right? It's like, geez, let me think a bit. Which one I would rather pay back? It might be a little hard. We might have to go off the Kraft macaroni and cheese, ramen noodles, bean and rice type diet for a little bit. But the point is that it is able to be paid off. It is able to be paid off in a measure of time. It is doable. Totally. But what did he do? But when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. He grabbed him and began to choke him. "Pay back what you owe me," he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, "Be patient with me and I will pay you back." My goodness, does this sound familiar? It's the same thing that he said to the king. Be patient and I will pay you back. The difference is that servant B could do that to servant A, the one who owes 100 denarii. He could do it. Verse 30, but he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. When the other servants saw what had happened, they were greatly distressed and went and told their master everything that had happened. This man who was just forgiven the 10,000 talents goes out and he finds a person who owes him 100 denarii, jumps him, chokes him, does violence to him, demands money back. This small, insignificant amount of money, which would not even come close to covering the debt that he has just been forgiven, and has this man thrown into prison because he can't pay him back. Really? But he was seen. He was seen by the other servants. And they were distressed. And they told the king. In verse 32, then the master called the servant in. "You wicked servant," he said, "I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you?" In anger, his master turned him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. Which again, if you remember, was not going to happen. So basically, the rest of his life. And then Jesus says this. "This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother from your heart." Our power to forgive other people should not come from our good nature. Our willingness to forgive should not come from other people willing to apologize. Our willingness to forgive should not come from the level of the wrong that was done to us. Our power to forgive should come from the realization of how much God has forgiven us. First and foremost. That's where it comes from. We have all been done wrong in our lives. But let's be honest. We have also all done wrong in our lives. But what we have to realize, if we're going to be followers of God, is that we all owe God that 10,000 talent worth of debt. We all have it against God. And if we have become baptized believers of our God, we have had that 10,000 talent debt taken away. That's the power of God's forgiveness. He has taken it away. But yet we're going to be so petty and so unforgiving as to squabble about little denarii type debts when we have had talents worth of debt taken off our accounts, taken out of our ledgers. No. Our power to forgive comes from the realization of how much God has forgiven us. And as Jesus says here, and as He says in other places in which Jesus talks about forgiveness, if we're going to be a type of people who rely so much on God's forgiveness, oh, God will forgive me, oh, God, please forgive me, then we cannot be people who are so petty as to withhold forgiveness from other people. We cannot do that. We are not allowed to do that. Because as He says here, and as He says other places, if we are unwilling to forgive others, we will not be forgiven. It's not about them. And it's not about what they have done. It's about us. But we are so tempted to say, oh, you don't know what they've done to me. The hurt was so big. How can I forgive? Consider this. This was written in the London Times. I just pushed something. This was written in the London Times back in April of 2015. Auschwitz survivor forgives former Nazi guard. Now, if you're not one for history, Auschwitz was one of the German concentration camps in which millions of Jews entered and they didn't leave. They were killed there, they were tortured there, they were experimented on there. And yet here we have a news article. Made the news. Think about that for a minute. Made the news. Auschwitz survivor forgives former Nazi guard. Listen to this. Eva Kaur, 81, and her twin sister were among the Mengele twins who were treated as human guinea pigs as part of notorious Nazi doctor Joseph Mengele's cruel experiment at the Auschwitz concentration and extermination camp. Oscar Groening, 93, was an administration officer, the camp's bookkeeper. Several days ago, during Groening's trial in Germany, they're still rounding up people who took part in the Holocaust and having them tried, Kaur approached him, embraced him, shook his hand, and forgave him, later explaining that they were just two old people reaching out. Groening was indicted as an accessory to the murder of 300,000 Jews at Auschwitz. Eva Kaur from the United States is one of the camp survivors, Holocaust survivors, who have joined the prosecution as co-plaintiffs. At the beginning of his trial, Groening expressed his regret, asked for the victim's forgiveness, and acknowledged that he was morally guilty of the horrors which took place at the camp. But he said it was up to the court to decide if he was legally guilty. Groening guarded prisoners' baggage on the ramps, but his main task was to collect and tally money stolen from the new arrivals and then send it to Berlin, a job for which German press has dubbed him the accountant of Auschwitz. For explaining that she had decided to forgive Groening but not the Nazi criminals. Groening appeared shocked by Kaur's gesture. She said he nearly passed out, but then smiled and kissed her on the cheek. Kaur's gesture angered the other Holocaust survivors who have joined the prosecution. We cannot forgive Groening for assisting the murder of 300,000 people, said one of the lawyers representing them. I don't forget what they have done to me, Kaur explained, but I am not a poor person. I'm a victorious woman who has been able to rise above the pain and forgive the Nazis. I know many people will criticize me for this photo, but so be it, she wrote on Facebook after sharing a photograph of her and Groening holding hands. It was two human beings 70 years after it happened. For the life of me, I will never understand why anger is preferable to a goodwill gesture. We might be holding on to stuff. We might be holding on to baggage. We might be holding on to wrongs that were done to us. But is our willingness to hold on to all the junk that has been done to us affecting how we are able to love our fellow man? Affecting how we are able to serve God? There have been people in the church who have walked away and spent 30, 40, 50 years away from God's family because of a wrong word said by somebody at a church gathering. Really? The damage that can be done by unforgiveness is massive if we choose to hold on to it. Let it go. If you are holding something wrong that was done to you for years ago, let it go. If you have strife with a brother or sister in Christ and it is keeping you from having God-centered fellowship with that person, let it go. If there is somebody in society who has done something wrong to you or to a loved one and it's affecting how you're able to view that person or other people like them, let it go. Let it go. Because it's hurting you. And when I do it, it's hurting me. Anger, it was once said, anger is like drinking poison expecting someone else to die. It just hurts us. Let it go. If there is somebody here who has an issue with somebody else here, before you leave, before you drive out of the parking lot, before you leave this auditorium, find that person and work it out. Because life's too short to hold on to the bitterness and the anger. It is too short to live with it. And it is killing us if we choose to hold on to it. And let's not forget, we will not be able to rely on God's forgiveness if we're so stern and uptight with our forgiveness. We are meant to be vessels of God here on the earth, and we need to show this world the capacity of God's willingness to forgive by our willingness to forgive. Remember the debt that has been canceled against us. We don't have to pay the 10,000 talents anymore if we have relied on God's forgiveness and have been baptized for the forgiveness of our sins. We don't have that anymore. It's gone. But don't hold on to the nickel and dime stuff. It's not worth it. And God is watching. Forgive as God has forgiven us. Today. This morning we like to offer the invitation to those of you who might be hurting, who might be suffering. Maybe there is bitterness in your life that you're just tired of holding on to it. Let it go. And we would love to help you in that today. We love to pray with you. We love to talk with you. We love to study with you. Or you might be wishing to seek the forgiveness of someone else. We would love to again. We would love to help you in any way we can. Or you might wish to put your Savior on in baptism, to have that debt taken away. One day we will all stand before the King. Stand before Him as righteous. We would love to assist you in your baptism this morning. That's why Jesus came, so that we can have this avenue of having our sins washed away. But whatever needs you have, would you please come down as we stand and as we sing. You ever feel that way? Yeah. Yeah, I remember, it was very humbling. I've always been a bigger than average guy, and my dad, who's only 6 foot, I can say that. My dad, who's only 6 foot, he used to say, I used to love watching you wrestle. And he didn't say that in hopes that I would lose, but there was times in my wrestling career I had to wrestle up a weight class, which means that I was in there with guys who could turn me upside down and to do anything they wanted to with me. And he said it was good to see that because he can't do it anymore. But that's the way it was. No. You ever been to a funeral in which you're talking with the family and someone says something along the lines of, I wish we were able to make peace before they died? William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet was written on that basis. The two families, Montague and Capulet, who had some sort of issue, was not resolved until Romeo and Juliet died. We're talking about forgiveness today, and the need to forgive, and the power of forgiveness, and the expectation of our being willing to forgive other people. This past Tuesday night at our VBS, we talked about the